Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for being here with us. This is USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and our show today is Your Story, Your Guilt, Your Journey. Our topic is a deep one. It's dealing with the guilt. Why not take me instead? Why do we bring topics like this to you? I was mentioning to Doug Lawrence backstage that today we started out with talking about dementia and home care. Next, we had a show about suicide and suicide prevention. These are very difficult and deep subjects to talk about, but it's when we don't talk about them that is really where the challenge comes in, because people already feel isolated and they feel alone. So joining me is Doug Lawrence, who is going through his own journey with grief. And we're going to find out about why this topic of dealing with the guilt, why not take me instead, is so important to him. Let's welcome the star of our show, Mr. Doug Lawrence, joining us from Canada. Hi, Doug. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much for that great introduction, and to all our listeners and viewers, no matter where you may be, welcome to our show today. And, you know, we certainly look forward to having a meaningful conversation around the topic of grief and guilt, and we'll go from there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Doug. For people who are joining us for the first time, this is our third episode, and people can find us here each and every week. You came to this platform as a guest. You were sent by your publicist, and we connected, and I could feel I felt like I could feel the pain that you were going through by sharing the story of losing your beloved wife. And from there, we learned more about you. I learned more about how you help other people. And so this is really an educational process, not just for you and for me, but for everyone who's watching and listening. Tell us why it's so important for you to share this story, even though it might be continuously bringing up pain by having to relive it.
Well, you know, it does bring up pain there, and I don't know how I could get around that from actually happening. But what I found for me is, and I would suggest to our listeners and viewers that, you know, what we've created here is a safe place for people to share their own personal stories. And for me, what I've found is, because of, you know, having the opportunity to be able to be on a show like USA Global TV and Radio as a very good example, and some of the other things that I've done, that, you know, it's therapeutic is really what it is for me. It's very therapeutic. It allows me to, you know, share that story. And as I'm sharing that story, I'm beginning and continuing my pursuit of a, you know, it allows me the opportunity to continue that healing journey.
And healing is really the name of the game, isn't it? It's really about how we can heal from within so that we can help other people heal as well. Would you say that's accurate, Doug?
Yes, I would. Yes, I definitely, I would agree with that.
And Doug, something I just want to share. I've personally witnessed this, not myself, but with others whom I've loved, that when it was clear that someone was passing away, that these were their final days, the final weeks, that this sense of incredible guilt, just in one case the person couldn't even stand, literally fell to their knees, because they realized that there were so many things that they wanted to say, they wanted to do, that they felt badly about, and now their time is so limited, and maybe their loved one is not even able or capable of acknowledging what might be an apology. How do we process this? Because it's inevitable that at some point we're not going to be able to say and do everything that maybe we wanted to.
Well, and like I found going through certainly some different situations, like with my father, when he was getting close to passing on, that what I wanted to, I felt the guilt I had was in the relationship that didn't exist between him and I. And I wanted to be able to amend that if I could, to be able to get it to, certainly to a place um, where we could both, and I don't want to use the word agree to, but that we both reach a place where we're amicable, I guess, on the part of the relationship that we had or didn't have. So for some people, I think the aspect of the guilt and how are we going to deal with that guilt, that's part of the closure that a lot of people, and I know I'm no different, is that's part of the closure that you're looking for when when you try to go down that path.
I agree with you. It is about that closure. And I think it's something to consider, is part of the whole emotional overwhelm, not just the fact that we feel guilty, but that we know that this person is leaving our life forever, unless we believe that we're coming back and we'll run into them in some way or form. Is it possible it's a combination of both things?
I would say it is. It definitely would be excuse me, a combination of those things. Because one of the things that I found for myself is that no matter what happens, anytime you have a loss of a loved one, that there's always guilt that is attached with that. And I don't know what it is. I think it's like it's an innate thing that we feel we have to do, that there's got to be guilt associated with the passing. And I mean, Deborah and I, we had just an absolutely fabulous relationship together. And, it was almost, and I don't want to downplay this by any stretch, but it was almost imminent that I was going to experience some guilt and feel that there was more that I could have done. And there definitely, when I think back to all the different things that took place, it's kind of like the shoulda, woulda, coulda aspect of things, is that, gosh, I should have done this, or if something would have changed in the whole cycle or sequence of events, I could have done this, or, if this happened, I would have done that. So there's all that whole aspect of shoulda, woulda, coulda is what, kind of was driving going forward. But I can, like, as I think back and I reflect back, there were times when I was driving from my house to the hospital to go and sit with her and be there with her, that I kept asking myself, well, is that enough? And from Deborah being the sort of person that she would be, she would be happy with, whatever time that we could actually put together. And for me, it was exactly the opposite. There was never going to be enough time for me to be able to get all the things in that I wanted to get in for the two of us before she actually passed. And you don't always have a date or a time or anything like that that specifically says that in Deborah's case, that Deborah's going to pass away on this day at this particular hour. It's a moving date. And that's what also makes it very difficult, is because you sort of think, well, maybe I'll wait and we'll have that conversation. Or maybe, well, I don't need to say I love you one more time because I've said it, 10 or 12 times already. And that's wrong. That whole thought process is, you can never, when you're about to lose a loved one, to help alleviate some of the guilt, you can never say I love you enough. And the more that you do, I don't say it diminishes the guilt, but it certainly does help us have a deeper understanding of how we can manage that guilt, similar to what you do with managing your grief.
You bring up some great points there, Doug. And I'm also thinking that while we're feeling the grief and anticipating the sense of loss, what must our loved one be feeling? And I guess in some cases, there has to be some kind of fear. And in other cases, people are feeling a sense of joy because they're going to be with God, or they're going to wherever it is they believe they're going. And yet, if we, in these last few days, weeks, moments, also start to unload all of the things that we didn't get to say yet, is that fair to them?
It's not. And I know, as I think back to the time frame and stuff, I tried to keep it as positive as, if that's even, remotely possible, but it was to try to keep it positive as much as I could. But when in doing so, I was almost downplaying the significance or the importance of what Deborah was going through and what we as a couple were going through, but more so her, because she was the sort of person that she always tried to put everyone else before she would put herself out there, so that, she had this huge heart, and she made sure that everybody else was being taken care of. And I remember I actually, not too long ago, I flipped back through some notes that I had, my calendar and all that stuff going. And she made sure that with each of the girls in her life, that each one was, my job was to schedule, for lack of a better choice of words, schedule them in for time with her before she passed, albeit the fact we didn't know for sure when that was going to be. So, she met with her daughter, with her daughter, granddaughter-in-law, and all, she met with a number of her girlfriend, and, but it was all the women that were in her life. They were the ones that she wanted to have a private conversation with. And so my job, if you want to call it that, my job was to make sure that took place, that I scheduled and made sure that if I had to leave, because we were dealing with COVID around that same time, so there were restrictions on number of visitors and stuff. And so if that meant I had to vacate, then that was the expectation, was that I was going to do that. And yet, from my own personal self, it was, well, that's time away from me as well. So I was feeling guilty from the aspect that the guilt was such that, I could be with her for more time. And I was sharing that time with some other people. And when I think back to it, it was pretty selfish on my part, to even think that way, that, I was trying to hoard all the time that I possibly could with her. And part of that is probably because, coming back to the guilt part, I didn't want to be in a place where I was going to be asking shoulda, woulda, coulda, and be able to, feel good enough that I had done all that I possibly could do, when, I think there's always, extra things that we can do that certainly from a, from a guilt perspective, that there's always things that we can do that are going to help strengthen that relationship as it's going through a period of, I guess, departure from, what the two of you had together.
And Doug, you just touched on something that I think many people have experienced, which is during the pandemic, people were hospitalized or they were in hospice, and family members, loved ones were not able to be with them. They were not able to be there at the end and say, I love you, or hold their hand. And as I mentioned, I know people who are still reeling with the grief of this and the anger of it, of not being able to be there. So I think from a perspective of providing our audience with some really insightful tips, at some point we have to let go and process what we're feeling, because our loved one is no longer here. For example, the hospitals or hospice, they had certain rules that they had to follow, so they were doing what it is they had to do. And how do we let go of that? I know for myself, my father died in 2012, and my mom and I took turns in the hospital. He was there for 35 days. We had a bed brought in and we slept there we took turns. But anyway, after he passed away, I was so angry at the doctor, one of the doctors, because he misdiagnosed his lymphoma, that I went to his office and I told him, I said, my father is dead because of you. And I just let the guy have it. Because I had so much anger. And was it the doctor's fault that my father died? No, I don't think so. There's a whole team of doctors, but I just let the guy have it. And I felt a lot better afterwards. And then when I left, I felt horrible, because doctors are doing the job that they have to do. They see so many patients. They're human beings. So my point is that my anger, my sense of loss, my guilt that I didn't do enough, I took out on a third party, and it's not very pretty. It's not human. It's human, but it's not compassionate.
Well, but there is a level of compassion in there, because you were sort of taking up the cause for a loved one, and that doing that, I think that doctors and nurses have come to expect that could very well be a reaction that, like I think of, Deborah's in the hospital, and so I wasn't allowed to use the washroom in her room or anything like that. So I had to, and this is at 4:00 in the morning, and I decide I'm going to go to the bathroom. So I take off to go, because then when I come back, I got to re-gown up and mask and all that other sort of stuff as well. But what I found was, when I got back, when I was coming back, I can see that they're wheeling somebody out on their bed. They're wheeling them out of the room that they're in, and they're obviously heading someplace. And I go, what's going on? And they said, well, we're taking Deb to end of life. And I'm going, and you had to wait till I went to the bathroom to do that? You couldn't, told me that this is what we're going to be doing, and, deal with, communicate a little bit better than what actually was taking place. So the temptation to let them have it with both barrels was so strong. But I got thinking, obviously there's somebody that's giving instructions that's, knows what we're supposed to be doing, and they've made the decision to go to end of life. And ironically, that was at 4 a.m. and she passed that afternoon at 2:00. So obviously it was the right decision that needed to be made at the time, but the temptation to, like I said, to let them have it with both barrels was so strong. But you're absolutely right. With some of the comments that you made around, the aspect of they're trying to do their best, and, us unloading on them, while it is at the time, it's a relief. It makes us feel better. As you experienced, a short period of time after that, all of a sudden then that's when you have the guilt for, oh, I should not have done that. I should have done something else. I could have done something else, or I would have done something else. So it's we're suffering a lot at that particular time point. We're going through dealing with what we now understand is going to be, imminent death. And we're trying to wrap our heads around what all that means. And then on top of that, we throw into that mixing pot, we throw into that the aspect of the guilt part. I woulda, coulda, shoulda done more, or, how come they're not doing this, or how come they're not doing that? I think of, with Deborah, she ended up, she did some radiation, which didn't do much for us. And then they decided to hit her with a pretty hefty dose of chemotherapy. So we went in, excuse me, we went in on a Friday for this massive dose of chemotherapy, and took her back on the Monday, I think it was. And within, well, by that weekend, because it was a Saturday, by that Saturday she passed. And so part of me says I need to go and have a conversation with the doctor, because I think the chemo is what killed her. But I know that they were trying everything that they possibly could. So this was a chemotherapy concoction that they hadn't used before, but they wanted to extend or prolong her life as much as they possibly could. And this was viewed as being a way that could potentially take place, when in fact it created the reverse. So, and I think for me, what's happened is that, and I do this almost far too often, I think at times, but is the aspect of, I keep replaying all of those dates and all of that time and all of the woulda, coulda, shoulda situations, and I keep playing them over and over and over again, trying to find, I don't know, I haven't figured out what I'm looking for. That I just realized that now, that I have no clue what I'm looking for. And that's kind of alarming to some extent as well, because now that's another form of guilt that I'm feeling, is that why don't you, why are you feeling the way you are? You should be feeling better than that. You should be doing this and doing that. And, and then on top of that all, then I have people that say, well, you shouldn't be feeling guilty at this stage. Don't tell me that. I don't want to hear that. That's just like somebody saying, well, I lost a loved one and this is how I grieve, so therefore you should grieve the same way. Each one of us has to deal with things in our own way, both from a grief and from a guilt perspective. And so as a takeaway, I encourage people to kind of open up and come out of the closet, so to speak, and deal with as best suits your own personal plan, is to be able to deal with the grief, but also to be able to deal with the guilt that comes with, the guilt that comes with the grief as well.
Yes, it's so powerful what you shared. And again, you have so much courage and strength. And I thank you for doing this, because it's not easy to go back there again. And I think also what's important is, as of today, this day, February 21st, 2023, there might be, for you, for me, for people out there watching or listening, there might be people that we don't have a close relationship with anymore. Maybe there was an argument, maybe there was a falling out, maybe there was a difference of expectations. So we know, as of today, we're not in a good place with Bill, Susan, Bob, whomever it might be. And we have to decide, if this was the last day that they were here on this earth, would we be at peace with where we are now? Because what I find so much is that life goes along and maybe there's a person we don't speak to, or maybe something happened and people went their own ways. And then we get the news, so and so has passed away. Now it's like, oh, I can't believe. Well, you had all the time before you got that news. Like, you didn't reach out to them. You didn't pick up the phone. You didn't try to make amends. So you have to be good with that. You have to say to yourself, okay, this could be the last day on this earth for this person, for me. Am I okay in my heart with where things are? What are your thoughts about that, Doug?
It's interesting that you should bring that up, because I actually had a situation not too horribly long ago where a colleague of mine, who we kind of float in and out of a relationship per se. We've done some work and stuff together and that, but he lost his mom, and it was, they sent me a notice to say, this is, when we're having the celebration of life and all that sort of stuff. And they, there was no indication, we would really appreciate you attending and stuff like that. Not that I needed one, but I actually went because out of respect to him and her, that, and I've been there. I lost my mom back in 2007, I think it was. And so I have a good inclination of what it is that, they're going to be dealing with. And so for me to stay home just because I can't be bothered to get in my vehicle and drive to the church doesn't cut it. And, going forward, I would suggest that when other situations like that happen again, I'm not even going to second guess myself. I'm not even going to look for a reason why I should not go. I'm going to actually go and pay my respects. And if there are things that I can do that can help them through their grief and dealing with obviously guilt now as well. But if there are things that I can do to help, I most definitely want to be there to be that person. Because it's okay to sort of make those promises or commitments and then find reasons not to follow through on them. And that part is something that definitely needs to change, because I just think of and joy is a strong word, but I just think I saw in their both husband and wife's face, I just saw the immense pleasure, or pleasure for lack of a better choice of words, but I saw the immense pleasure of them when they saw that I was there. I've gotten cards from them. I've had, we need to get together for a coffee when we're done, getting the estate and all that stuff settled and all that sort of stuff. So I know that, I'm going to do whatever I need to do on my end, on my part, to be able to help, make sure that contact, that relationship continues to foster and grow, and that I'm going to be there to do whatever I can do to help them go through the grieving and the guilt that they undoubtedly will be dealing with.
I think it's really tremendous that you have that kind of awareness, and that you are looking at yourself to that degree, and being aware of what's coming up for you, and then looking at how are you going to handle things in the future. And I celebrate that, because many times we just get so caught up in what we're doing, or we take an attitude, I don't have to go there, they're not going to appreciate it, nobody's going to notice me, and it becomes about us instead of about the other person. So what I think is also important as we talk about this very deep and important subject is, sometimes we have guilt about a relationship that's ended, or we have guilt about a job we no longer have. We didn't really push ourselves the way we should have. We just hung around and took a paycheck. Or we have a friendship and maybe it was one way, the other person was always making the reach out. How can we set boundaries, Doug, to first of all give ourselves grace because we can't be perfect. We can't be on time, on spot, on point for every single relationship. I mean, maybe some people can, but I think there are times when we fall. How can we give ourselves grace and also have some realistic boundaries that we're not going to be the right person for or the right fit for every relationship or every job or every commitment?
I think, what we need to do in those situations is kind of flip it on the sort of the reverse and look at it from the aspect of, in an ideal state, what would I like to be the recipient of? So if I've had a close relationship with somebody that's kind of gone south, is what can I do now to change the outcome of that, even though it's already on a path? What are some of the things that I need to do to change that? And then my other point that needs to be made is that it's what did I learn from that particular situation? So, and I always use reflection. So, what went well, what didn't go well, and what will I do differently next time, so that maybe we're not having to have a conversation about a relationship that's gone south or gone bad. So, to be able to deal with things simply by using a reflective process is going to make it a little bit easier for you to have to deal with that. And you listed off a number of different situations that are commonplace in I have a colleague that I do some mentoring with, this particular individual who went through a relationship breakup, so to speak. And one of the things that they found, because of their interaction with me, one of the things they found was that journaling and then actually writing a book to talk about relationships. And she actually has, she's written a small section in my next book, which deals with grief, and she uses the relationship piece as an example of how, in her case, how there was grief as a result of the loss of that relationship. But it's also, what was really interesting and a different perspective was there was also the loss of her identity as a person. And this opens up a whole different aspect of, when we take a look at, the aspect of, so she's gone from being in a couple's relationship to now she's single. So she's now become that plus one. So because anything that she wants to go and participate in is going to be couples. So, she may very well have to, if that's the path she wants to take, she may very well have to, find somebody that will go with her to social outings and stuff like that. So, and I'm a good example of that, is that I'm very selective now with the loss of Deborah. I'm very selective as to what events I'm going to participate in because of that, is that I'm going through a bit of a identity challenge, for lack of a better choice of words, because everything we had done before was always couples related, and now it's just me. And so I need to be able to wrap my head around what does that look like, and where do we go from there. And so with that, there's also some guilt, is that, am I letting down that core friendship group that we had before? Am I letting them down just because that's the way I feel? And, I need to be able to approach it or look at it from a different angle. And I'm not there yet, but I definitely, need to think more about that as we go forward.
I think all these insights that you share are so important because it's a journey. And as you know, when we hear should, you should feel this way, you should be doing this. There is no should. There's the journey that we take. And if those people are there for us throughout the journey, this next stage of the journey, well, that's great. But maybe they won't be there because maybe they're not meant to be there. Maybe as you go on this journey, you're going to find a new group of friends, a new group of people you align with, and maybe some of the existing will still be there. But I feel it's really important for all of us, for you, for me, and for anyone watching or listening, that we don't have to conform to what someone else expects of us when we lose someone. And I want to also talk about this, the journaling. I think it's so important. Many times a relationship can end and we don't have the ability to understand why. There's no closure and we're haunted or tormented by it, whether it's with a loss of a loved one, maybe it was a suicide, or maybe it was a car accident. It was something unexpected and we never got to have that last conversation. Or maybe it was a love of our life and the relationship ended because the person didn't want it anymore and then disappeared, whatever the case may be. But we're left with those feelings. And if we don't get them out, if we suppress them, it's surely going to hurt our health and our self-esteem. So I think journaling is a great way to get those feelings out. What are some other ways that you can think of, Doug? I know you mentor and work with people. What can you share about if we don't have that opportunity for the closure, how can we take those feelings and get them out?
I think number one, and you already touched on it, number one is definitely the journaling and writing out. One of the exercises that I've done with 2 or 3 individuals is have them journal for for a week or so, and when they get to that point and everything is they've written what they want to write, then what I typically encourage them to do is to go in their backyard or wherever they feel comfortable and take the journal and burn it. And that's a signal to yourself that, I've captured all of the things that, that are causing me concern, grief, guilt, all of those things. And I've written them down. So I've come out of my closet to be able to do that. And now I'm going to light them on fire to get the closure that I need to get in order to be able to move on. And so that, to me, that's a really good approach to take. I've done it myself, and it's so uplifting and so therapeutic. Just the lighting of that on fire is really a great thing to be able to do. And you being able to step out of that closet and reach out and ask for help is definitely something that we don't do a good job of, but we have to get better at in order to be able to continue the clearing process. And I've also, in order to get closure, I've also I've done the hypnotherapy. I've done all kinds of other mediums to be able to get the closure that I needed. And while it may not be something that others believe in, it works for me. And that's the most important thing, is that whatever you do has to be whatever you want, not what somebody else tells you should do. There we go with the shoulds again. But that you have to do what's going to work for you and help you get to where you want to be, not where someone else thinks you should be.
Absolutely. And I think something else that's really important as we come to the end of the show already is about our words and the words that we share with others when something is over. And I'll give an example, and this might be a good topic for another show. You leave a job, and then your family members say, that job was never good enough for you anyway. You weren't working to your full potential there. And meanwhile, whatever the reason was, you still have an attachment to that you haven't processed yet, or you're in a relationship with someone and it doesn't work out. He or she was never good enough for you. I don't know why you wasted time with that person. We always felt uncomfortable when you're with that person. Then you get back with the person, and then you have all those things that people said. Everyone's kind of like dancing around and feeling guilty. So I feel that the words that we share and the time in which we share them, they can resonate for a very long time, and they can be devastating. And even though we might walk around with a smile on our face and we might see the people on a regular basis, we still remember what they said when we were at a very vulnerable time.
No, I agree with 100%. And the best approach a person can take when you're in a situation like that is, I always tell people I call it my pausing technique. And the idea behind it is that you're in a conversation and you want to say something to somebody, and you're pondering whether I'm going to say this or not. I always tell people, pause and ask yourself the question, how would I feel if somebody were to say what I'm wanting to say? How would I feel if somebody did that or said that to me? And if there are any red flags, then what you need to do is rephrase that particular statement, and maybe even you don't say anything at all, and you just bring closure to the conversation by saying, that's interesting. I'd like to discuss this further with you when we both have some more time to be able to do so. And, obviously there's different spin-offs from that, but the gist is to pause, to allow time for yourself, who is doing obviously the speaking, to be able to sort of say that, okay, I get a red flag, so therefore I don't think I should say what I'm about to say, and go from there. So that's another technique that people can think about using as well. And to be honest, it's really worked well for me, especially when I do leadership mentoring, and you have a bit of friction between a leader in the organization and one of the employees, and this approach seems to work well. But you have to do it consistently and all the time in order to, number one, get good at it, but number two, in order for it to have the effect that it needs to have.
Absolutely. And Doug, you couldn't have said it any better. I'm really reminded of what we typically forget, which is people want someone to listen. They don't want to know it all, to point out everything that we're doing wrong. And yet we have a tendency, I'm the same way. It's kind of like, as soon as they are finished sharing, you want to jump on and go, ha, ha, ha. Like, what were you thinking? We all told you he was crazy, or whatever the case is. No, we can't do that, because that just makes the other person feel less. And what we want to do is make the other person feel more. We want to let them know we're here for them, and we're not the judge and jury of what's going on. And I think if it starts with me, it starts with you, it starts with every person out there watching or listening, because that's how we want to be treated, isn't it?
Exactly.
Instead of saying, Doug, you should be further along. Doug, you should be going out. Doug, this, that. No, please keep your comments to yourself. It's not helping Doug. You're basically pointing out things that are a reflection of what you feel, not what Doug's feeling.
Yeah. And I don't I don't know why it is that way, but people have a tendency to do what's good for them and not think about the impact that has on other people. And I see that more and more. And obviously it's, because of the work that I do, that I see, in a lot of situations where people are very, as I call them, they're very me-focused individuals, and they're not looking at it from the aspect of what can we collectively, as a group, what can we accomplish if we kind of all row in the same direction.
So true. Doug, we are at the end of the show today. I would love for you to share how you can support people, how people can purchase your books, and how they can partner with you to move into the next stage of their journey?
Well, the book, I have two books out right now. The one that has drawn quite a bit of interest is the book that's You Are Not Alone. And it's an Amazon #1 bestseller. It receives the Bronze Global Book Award. And it also was #1 in the UK just recently. So it's done really well. So you can get that book, and the other one, which is my first book, The Gift of Mentoring. Both are available on Amazon.com and Amazon.ca. So if you're interested, I encourage you to get a copy of the book, and after you're done reading that, then you can come on the show as a guest, and we'll go from there with that. And how people can reach out to me, they can certainly reach out to me through my website at www.talentc.ca. And you can also, go through LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn, I'm fairly active on there, so you could go through my profile and direct message me that particular way as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Doug. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Please go over to our YouTube channel, USA Global TV and Radio, and look for the playlist with the name of this program, Your Story, Your Grief, Your Journey. Doug, it's a pleasure to share this space with you, and I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. And the same for me as well.
Fantastic. It just goes to show you, everybody out there watching or listening, when you get out of your comfort zone and you do something that you weren't looking forward to doing, or maybe never even thought of doing, someone suggested it to you, you never know who you're going to meet, and you never know where it's going to go. But for sure, if you stay in your same old, it's not going to go anywhere meaningful. All right. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you being here today. We'll be back with our next show shortly. Bye, Doug. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.